Well, great. Well, thank you, Kelly, so much for joining me today on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's start off. Tell me a little bit about your journey into higher education. What drew you into this industry?
Sure. Well, once I finished up my marketing degree, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do or, what field I was interested in. And while I was in school, I had been working in the finance industry and I knew that wasn't the fit for me. And I just happened to see a job opening at Ivy Tech Community College in Indianapolis and applied and got the job. And really that's when I started to fall in love with higher education. And I think the moment that really hooked me was attending my first graduation and just seeing the pride on, the parents' faces, the partner faces, the children's faces, because they have a lot of traditional as well as non-traditional students. And just having that experience, like this was, it's different than product marketing a little bit in that you're doing something that in a way changes lives. And I find that just very, very fulfilling. And it's what's kept me in higher education for so many years. And I still enjoy going to graduations. It's not something that I've gotten used to or I don't find exciting anymore. I still, every time I leave, I leave one with a smile on my face because, like your work played a small part in that experience. And so it definitely keeps me fueled.
It's so interesting that you bring up graduation because our company name, Graduate Communications, that is the whole reason I named our company Graduate Communications, and now we call ourselves GradComm, was because when I worked at a community college campus, graduation, it's the pinnacle event. It's where you see the role that everybody on campus plays. I mean, from the marketer to the janitor to the faculty
Mm-hmm.
member, we've all played a small part in that student's journey and getting them to the finish line. It's kind of the pinnacle of what it's all about is
It
right there
is.
in
It's
that
the grand
graduation.
finale. And I
Yeah.
just think there's no experience like it, no feeling like it. And it's a real milestone in people's lives. And I think there's, not a lot of brands for certainly some that really take part in such a milestone moment.
Oh, for sure. It's such a great thing to be a part of as a marketer
Hmm.
too. Now you made the leap from community college to Purdue,
Hmm.
which is really like a globally known brand. What has that been like?
Well, it's been great, and I've been here over 20 years, so definitely has. It's been a wild but fulfilling ride. So when I was working at Ivy Tech, a colleague had moved on to Purdue at the time, and a job opening came, and she was like, "Hey, I think there was some elements of the work that was doing at Ivy Tech from a programmatic perspective that aligned with this new position." She's like, "I really think you should apply." And at the time, that also like it was just the optimal for a life change. Working at Purdue meant moving back closer to home, and we had just had our second child, and so being back home closer to grandparents, and also working for a university that I already loved and respected was just a win-win situation. So I joke around with those when I interview for positions now to work on our team. Don't judge me because I have been here for over 20 years. That does not mean I lack ambition because I'm a very ambitious person. What this means is I love the brand and I love the work, and we work with really great people. And so I have really enjoyed my experience here and still do.
Well, and what's so interesting about being somewhere for 20 years is you've really been able to see a lot of shifts and a lot of
Hmm.
trends change. And when you and I spoke last time, we talked a lot about this shift from marketers really being information providers to today being storytellers.
Hmm.
And you've really embraced that shift. Tell me a little bit about how your staff and your team are such great storytellers and how you weave that into your work.
I mean, I really think it's central to our work. We view ourselves as the chief storytellers of Purdue University. So as we approach every year, every initiative, we think about what are the human elements, the stories, the emotion that come into play to really demonstrate to someone, why should they care? We're competing for time, which is everyone's most valuable resource. And so there are some times where you have to, deliver information in a very succinct way, but most of the time, you are looking to influence someone's perspective, someone's level of awareness. And when you're coming at it from that lens, you have to connect with storytelling of a human human truth that hopefully resonates with them and grabs their attention and gets them to listen and make an impact. So doing that through stories versus just a graphic through words or something like that it's antiquated at this point to do it that way and expect to be effective and to have staying power.
What are some other trends that you've seen over the years? Like, have you seen, we hear about helicopter parents and tiger parents. Have you seen a change in the way parents are approaching college or the way students are finding information? What are some of the things you've noticed?
Sure, we're definitely seeing that parents are more involved in the process and that students are relying on their parents more as a part of the decision-making process. I mean, it's usually the parents bringing the student, to the visit and engaging, I would say, even at a higher level than the students as far as like questions and wanting information and wanting details. So we've really taken that into consideration because, this is a big decision. So you don't want to underscore that. It's an investment of time. It's an investment of resources, of money, all different types of things. And so we do, we don't take that for granted. And so, one thing we've done this year when we redid our view book is having dedicated information for parents that is more built out, more customized of kind of the frequent questions that we were seeing being asked and the things that parents really care about, and just making sure that we're intentionally engaging them, not as an afterthought or not kind of operating with the expectation that, okay, we're going to give this to the student and the student is going to pass it along to the parents. So we're doing some things that target the parents directly in order to have the information that they need in order to make a decision that they feel confident about for their student or advise their student in a very confident and informed way.
Yeah, that is such great advice to intentionally engage parents. And it makes me reflect on my own college journey with my 17-year-old because I'm trying to let him make his own decisions, but man, he just makes really poor decisions sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
a college will reach out. He's a soccer player. The coach will reach out and he'll go onto TikTok and within 5 seconds decide yes or no. And it's like, you can't make a decision on
Mhm.
the next 4 years of your life over some TikTok video. Like, let's look at things together. Let's go to the
Sure.
website, so,
And a lot of times
so
that
yeah,
comes down to the visit. Because
right.
I'm in the same boat now. I have college age kids and I have one at Purdue right now and I have a daughter who's 17 and we're looking at schools and every place has a culture. And you have to go on campus and experience that to understand, is this place going to be a fit for me? Because it's your home for the next few
Yeah.
years. So it does need to feel right. You need to feel like you can see yourself as a part of that culture. And really the best way to do that, and maybe it's the old school in us, is an in-person visit where you're seeing the place, you're feeling the
100%.
place, you're hearing how people talk, how they reference different things, what community means like to that
Right.
university. It really varies from place to place, which it should, because there's a lot of different, a lot of different students with a lot of different needs. So a university isn't a one size fits all. They all serve very different purposes.
Yeah, we went to one recruit day at a college whose team he made, and they had a whole day for parents. And I left wanting to go to that college. I'm like, I want to go here,
Yeah.
but he left saying, I don't think this is my place. And I was
Interesting.
kind of bummed. I'm like, I love this school. And anyway, long story short, he's decided he doesn't want to leave home. It was too far.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and that was a good thing to learn. That was a good thing to learn. So,
Well, I think
but
part of
yeah,
that
I'm like, I
process,
want to enroll.
yeah, and part of that process, though, you then had
Yeah,
a really informed conversation with him. Okay, why doesn't this feel like it? What's not hitting for you? And then kind of, I feel like you start to learn the puzzle pieces along the
yeah,
way of like, okay, what fits here? What is all going to fit together? And really pull together the picture that you're looking for. It's definitely a step-by-step process. I think those
right.
after visit conversations are really critical.
And it's great if you, as a marketer at a university, can give parents some guidelines, like your
Mhm.
FAQ questions, or maybe even help. Like, here's some things you should talk to your student about after a visit or through the application process. And that's embrace that rather than be annoyed by it.
Oh, for
Embrace the
sure. Because
parent role. Yes.
parents, they're a key customer audience as well.
Great
It
name.
really needs to be a fit for the family.
Right. Now, you think of Purdue, or I think of Purdue University, and I think most of our listeners would probably agree. Like, you've got a tremendous name recognition,
Mhm.
a great brand. But you recently, went through. You mentioned you redesigned your view book. You went through a research-driven like brand strategy.
Mhm.
What brought you to that point? Why did you need to do that, and what was it like?
Well, if I feel like now it's kind of going back in the Wayback Machine, but we had our 150th that wrapped up in 2019. And we are which I think is common, a decentralized system. And so in that system, there's a lot of people on your campus, who have the megaphone to talk about your brand. And people were doing it in a variety of ways. There really wasn't a unifying brand platform. We had a ton of different logos. We had a secondary color palette that we affectionately refer to as the Skittles palette. All kinds of things were happening. And what's amazing is despite all that, we still had a very strong brand. But then there was this moment during the 150 where like everybody started rowing the boat together. Everybody was jumping on the 150. The messaging was consistent. The guidelines were consistent. And then that's where you really started to see the power of like, we're strong separately, but we're a force. When we come together and we work together and we want more of that. We don't want it to end when the 150 is over. And so that's when we really started digging in of, okay, if we want to be singing, we say we can have a song but everybody needs to be singing the same chorus. And so if we want to do that, what does that look like? And that's when we dug in and developed the Giant Leaps brand platform that started with learning our brand. What are the brand drivers? That's the work that we did with brand trust, where we brought in key stakeholders to have conversations about our brand, about how they feel, what do they think, talking about different experiences. What did they smell? What did they see? What did they remember? Really leaning into that sensory experience to try to pull through some common themes. So as we did that, we developed those brand drivers, those commonalities that came through those different interviews, and then rolled out that brand platform right before COVID in the spring of 2020. And we couldn't have predicted that timing, but at a time where we needed unification, the timing couldn't have been any better, in that we were now all aligned. We got rid of the secondary palette. Things were a lot more structured. We refer to it as freedom within the framework. There is freedom for that, that the messaging, but it's all in the same tone and the same voice. It's going back to, there's ways you can say a lot of different things at Purdue, but ultimately it needs to be in brand character, and really feel like we've achieved that. Because on the flip side of that, we also really focused at the same time of putting in more resources and tools in place that, empowered the colleges, the units, the institutes, whatever the case may be, to have the tools that they needed to be in brand and in character, by providing things like our template system, a very expansive brand guide. Like I said, different enterprise tools that they now had access to help with their marketing and communications at the college program level, whatever it might be. And then that really, I felt, was a critical moment for us. The other thing we did, and at the time wasn't allowed, was expanding the use of the Motion P. So prior to that time period, the Motion P was used exclusively for athletics. There was a different mark on the academic side. Well, our Motion P is our most recognizable, visible mark. And so bringing that into the academic side also definitely sweetened the deal. It was something folks had been looking for a long time. And so through a series of decisions and launching that platform, I felt like we then built upon the momentum that we established in the 150 of being one Purdue and presenting ourselves in a way consistently that is reflective of the character of Purdue University.
It's fantastic. I was really caught up on your talking about the research and talking about the sensory-based
Mhm.
interviews. And that sounds really different and really interesting. Can you give some examples of the questions that were asked or what you learned from that exercise?
Sure. So we interviewed a variety of stakeholders, and it is it's a really interesting exercise to go through. So it's done in a couple different ways. One is, it's kind of the two-way glass, and someone's on the other side of the mirror being interviewed. We also did them over the phone, and you have someone that not from Purdue University interviewing them. So it was an individual from Brand Trust conducting the interview. So they feel like they do have like the space and the freedom freedom to say exactly what we're thinking, which is what we want. And so, for example, talking to an alum, can you tell me about the first time you were on campus? What were you seeing? What were you feeling? What did it smell like? Just diving into those, or, what was an unexpected moment that you had during your time at Purdue? Talking to a faculty member, tell me about a time you were walking through campus and you met someone that was unexpected. What was that interaction like? So a variety of questions of that nature. But we also went on the flip side of a prospective student who got accepted Purdue and didn't choose to come. What part of the tour did you feel that it didn't resonate for what you were looking for in a university? So digging into both sides of it and really understanding who your brand is for and who your brand is not, because it's not a one size fits all. Like, you're not for everybody, and you shouldn't be. Like, what are the things that make Purdue distinctly Purdue, and what are the attributes that match up with that? So you really dig into that and start to learn. And I tell you, one of the things, after working here for so long, you kind of look through things with rose-colored glasses, right? Is you're not as self-critical. And also you don't necessarily recognize sometimes the things that maybe are unique just because you don't know any different. So one of the things that really stood out to me during those conversations was that the fact that Purdue felt students like they were in it together, that they weren't competing against their classmates, but that they were working together to achieve something. Whereas, I viewed that as just like a normalcy at Purdue, right? We roll our sleeves up, we see the challenge, we figure out what needs to be done, and we get in there together and we figure it out. It never kind of dawned on me that at other places it might be viewed more as a competition. So I think it was a really good exercise, not only in defining the brand, like that was fundamental, but also a nice refresher for those of us who are in marketing, who'd been around for a long time, to kind of reset on our own beliefs and what we know about the place that we all, care about so much.
That's great. Well, I want to talk more about how you use this research and what you learned in order to tell a really ownable story.
Mm-hmm.
But before we dive into that, let's hear a little bit from our sponsor.
How do higher education decision makers find the right solution when technology evolves at light speed? Well, we usually start with our network. EdTech Connect is the network that's democratizing the higher ed technology conversation. EdTech Connect is free, so anyone with a .edu email address can sign up and list the software and services they use in their role at their school. Once you're in, you can find out what solutions similar schools are doing all over the country. Whether you're looking to find the hot new AI tool, or maybe learn options you have to upgrade your campus search engine, or even get to your short list of marketing solution vendors, EdTech Connect is the place to go. So visit edtechconnect.com and set up your free profile to get a pulse for what's happening with higher ed technology today.
All right, so we're back. So before the break, we were talking about the fabulous research that you did with Brand Trust, that questioning both students who chose Purdue, go to Purdue, graduated alumni, but also those who didn't choose you, which I think is great, because working with colleges and universities, a lot of them want to be something for everyone, and they have a hard time really discovering what it is that makes them unique. And every college is unique. I mean, even the community colleges that we work with that do take nearly everyone have unique traits, unique programs, and they really have a hard time finding what that is and telling a story that's ownable. And a lot of times the clients that we work with, the colleges we work with, you can just interchange their marketing. I mean, you could take this ad and just switch their names and their logos, and it's the exact same ad. So how have you gotten Purdue to a point where you're really your own brand, like it's a real ownable story that only Purdue can have?
Well, that was a part of the work of the Next Giant Leaps platform, and leaning into, we're very proud of the fact that Neil Armstrong is an alumnus of Purdue University, and are very proud of his words. one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And so we leaned into that. Nobody else can claim that. Neil's presence is very much felt on our campus. We have the Neil Armstrong Hall of Engineering. We have the moon boot footprints alongside that building. But then, okay, the essence of that is that there was many small steps to that giant leap moment. And so when we talk about differentiation and our storytelling, it really goes into our content strategy. So some stories are about that next giant leap of achieving something huge. But some stories are about, what were the small steps that are inspiring your next giant leap? Whereas others lean into the element of persistence of, we embrace failure. Sometimes you have to go again and again and again until you reach that next small step. So embracing it from different angles that make it relatable, that help drive the angle of your storytelling is really important. So after we finished up the brand platform, the next step we took was defining that content strategy and how are we going to frame our stories? What is that going to look like to make sure we have a mix for our target audiences that resonates? So I'll give you an example. For prospective students, the idea of a giant leap is really intimidating. So when we're talking to prospective students, it's about taking the small steps that you need to take, that you're strong enough to take in order to get to your next giant leap. So, thinking through it through the eyes of our audience, and we know all that from testing, is that they do find that intimidating. So when we talk, it is about the small steps and getting you ready for your next giant leap.
This makes so much sense, but I can't help but ask, like, did you get anybody not liking it on campus? Did you ever get like people like, oh, that's not, we shouldn't just focus on leaping and Armstrong? And did you get any pushback? Because we hear that a lot from colleges where they try to do something new and really own who they are, their history. And then some voice on campus comes back and kind of derails what they're doing. Did you experience any of that in your process?
I would say to a degree, but I think the differentiator was buy-in from the top. So when we rolled out the brand platform, we had an all-day session in our union where for the first time, at least in my time at Purdue, we brought all the marketing and communications professionals in one room at the same time. And one, that demonstrated like we value you as a community. You're really important. You're a part of the megaphone here when we talk about the brand. But our president at the time, Mitch Daniels, addressed the group and pretty much said this is not an option. He showed appreciation for the work and appreciation for the valuable role that all of these contributors in the room, their roles in contributing to the strength of the Purdue brand, but set the tone that this was now an expectation moving forward. So when we have moments, a lot of times it's when someone new gets hired to Purdue University, we do provide brand training. But if there isn't, if there's some gaps, instead of just coming along inside and say, hey, you're doing this wrong or you're not in brand, we approach it out of a place of care and respect and say, hey, I noticed this is off in brand voice, but let me help you get this to a better place and come alongside as that helping hand versus kind of, you always get more with honey versus a stick. So we try to take the honey route.
Great. I mean, what I'm hearing you say from the work that you've done is that you leaned in on a great process. Mm-hmm. You did the research, you followed a process, you got a neutral third party to come in and help you. You had leadership buy-in and you involved the campus. So I am reiterating this because I have seen, this just happened a couple weeks ago. People try to come up with a brand in ChatGPT.
Oh no. Don't do
Cindy,
that. Don't do that.
Yeah. Cheryl, what do you think about all of these ideas I got in ChatGPT? And I'm like, and now AI is going to give you the most common thing possible. Right. It's not going to give you what makes you unique. And they were all tropes. It was like, and then I'm at this trying to be nice and be like, okay, no, you need to follow a process. You need to involve the campus. This is a big project. This isn't something that you do over lunch or over the weekend.
No, this was months in the making. Absolute months in the making. And by the time we rolled it out, there was really no surprises. Like, we had done a lot of socialization. So at the time, during the 150, we also formed a brand council. So it was all like the lead marketers from across the campus were getting together at a regular cadence, talking through things, listening. So they were also involved in the process. So when it launched, I'm sure there were people in the room that this was new to, but for the most part, everybody knew that this was coming, and at least had an inclination of what it was going to be about and what it was going to entail. So that was a key part of the process. And you're right, differentiation is key. I mean, one of the tests that we still do, when we're getting ready to roll out a big spot or, put something out into the world that we're anticipating is going to have a significant reach, it's the logo test. Like, could you take this piece of work and put another university's logo at the end of it, and that makes sense? If it does make sense, then we missed. It's not distinctively Purdue if it passes that test.
Yeah, what a great test. I hope everybody out there is listening. Just slap on someone else's logo.
I know.
Does it work? Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things, especially like when you go through an airport and you see the sea of university ads, like, where could you just switch out logos and you wouldn't know the difference?
By the way, do you do airport advertising? I have to know.
Oh my gosh, this is a hot topic.
So did I stir the hornet's nest
stir the
a little
hornet's
bit here?
nest. I think what's really challenging from an airport perspective is, particularly like our airports in Indianapolis, at any given time, there's at least 10 universities advertising. So we have tried to be very strategic of when do we advertise, because what we do consistently get is more alumni upset that we're not in the airport. And sometimes it's hard to communicate, well, it's not for you. I'm trying to talk to audiences that don't know us, that don't already love us, and educate them about Purdue University and increase brand awareness. So I feel like it's a constant kind of back and forth. There are times, we have been, and like we're doing something in the spring, because we're anticipating that we're going to have a pretty good basketball season. And with March Madness, the Final Four is happening in Indianapolis this year. So doing something in the airport around that time, that makes sense. But we try to be really strategic in what we do at the airport, just because it is such a convoluted space when it comes to university presence.
Yeah, we're recording this right now in December, and I just wrapped up speaking at 7 higher education conferences. So I was in the Indianapolis airport, was one of the conferences was in Indianapolis. And I should have taken pictures on my journey of all the university airport advertising. I'm like, this is crazy. It must have been, it's wild. It's wild. So I'm glad I finally got to ask somebody about it.
Yeah, it's a tough subject. Alumni get really upset about it sometimes that they get off the plane, particularly if it's a rivalry situation and they have a really strong presence and you don't. It's that competitive spirit comes out, which I totally get. I hear you. I feel you on that. But we also know the reality of we're working with limited dollars and trying to maximize impact. So when I'm trying to maximize impact, it's more strategic to use those dollars in a way that influences awareness of a new audience or consideration of a new audience rather than an already loyal audience. So I feel like it's a tug of war that I experience pretty frequently.
Well, and this gets me to another thing I wanted to ask you about brand marketing and airport marketing is, how do you measure if you're successful? Like with a project like what you did with your rebrand, do you track metrics? Do you look at outcomes? How can you tell when something like this is working?
Sure. We have a variety of methods, and I would say we are getting better and better at this practice. Our most consistent way we're doing it is on a by project basis. So when I look at our enterprise campaign, which is targeted at an unaffiliated academic and corporate audience, we did a baseline brand tracker of establishing what do they already know about us, who is aware of us, what are the things that we're looking to shift, and then have repeated that once. We'll repeat it again at the end of the 18 months to see what we are impacting, but then we have other KPIs we're measuring. So in that instance, it's web visits to the landing page, it's the number of leads that we're generating, it's watch time on our videos, other elements like that. Now, from an overall brand perspective, this is one where I feel, be honest here, that we have some work to do. We are in the process of establishing a brand health scorecard that we have a set of metrics that we measure year over year. We've had different things that we've measured as far as like messaging. That probably comes top of mind from a brand perspective. And, we've done awareness studies, those types of things. But I feel like we're evolving to a place where we need some routine measurements that we're going and measuring year after year. So we start to exactly see where are we making impact, where are we maybe like sliding a little bit, and have some routine measurement in addition to the very project specific things for all of our large campaigns, whether it be enterprise, our STEM era activation, our Sunnyfest activation, whatever the case may be, we always have KPIs that we go into that project with. But from an overall brand perspective, we're to that point where we are establishing a brand health scorecard, as well as developing some ongoing dashboards and Looker Studio where we can measure a variety of things that are linked to our annual goals document to see how we're tracking. So I believe our sophistication in there is dialing up. I think this is one of those things when you are kind of lean and mean, which I think most higher education institutions are, making space for research can be tough because it's not only, it's a unique expertise. There's also like a level of technical savvy that you have to have in order to get the dashboard set up. So it's one of those things that you do have to, I feel, dedicate as a priority. You have to budget for, get the expertise behind, and decide what is it that we're going to measure, and then what are, like, based on what we're going to measure, how are we going to action on those results? Because if you're just measuring things or kind of have random KPIs each time, and those aren't driving decisions, then that was a waste of time. So we're really focused on how do we get actionable measurement or actual decisions or information, and message testing. Okay, we review that with the team, and then what are we changing about our creative based on what we learned? So that has definitely been a muscle that we have continued to build post brand launch.
That's great. I love this idea of a brand health scorecard. I feel like branding is one of those things that you just can't put a dollar amount. You just can't measure it well. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't measure something, but sometimes there are some things that just aren't going to translate into numbers.
Sure.
But at least having something that you're looking at and providing to the college and, to the board or whoever is looking at your department is helpful, rather than just being like, yeah, our brand's great.
I think it's more important than ever, actually, as budgets get tighter across the higher education space. In marketing, you've now got to be talking the same language as your finance people, as your CFO. What is the ROI here? Where are we driving? What impact are we making to justify those budget dollars? Because particularly in the public space, we aim to be good stewards and we want to be driving impact. And so you've got to, where you can, associate that back to ROI from the university.
For sure. Well, I've loved talking to you. I've written down like 10 different things and points that I want to think about more and explore. And as we wrap up our conversation, with such a great background that you've had in marketing and such a lengthy background at Purdue, is there anything, if you could go back to your earlier, younger self, is there any piece of advice that you would give at the start of your career?
There is. I think I am kind of a rule follower by nature. And, early in your career, I think you're in this mode of kind of pleaser mode, like you're wanting to establish yourself, you're learning. That's a little bit vulnerable. If I went back and talked to younger Kelly, I would say be more curious. One of my favorite shows is Ted Lasso. It's like amazing from a business perspective, but be curious and not judgmental. Ask more of the whys, whether that's behind decisions or details or whatever the case may be. I think that would have served me well if I was more curious in my younger years and kind of ramping up and probably just thinking more outside the box. Like now that's very natural to me. But in my younger days, not so much.
Oh, such great advice. And let me tell you, this is such great advice for branding, because if you're a people pleaser and trying to
Mm-hmm.
adhere to a brand, you are going to destroy your brand.
You are going to destroy your brand. And I think that, and not destroy, but I've seen the impact of of leaders who were not comfortable making decisions based on data and trying to be people pleasers. It just fractures it fractures the organization. So that is one thing that as I've grown, and of course this comes with time and experience and age, is you get more confident, and like making decisions is something that I am very, very passionate about. Not waffling, making the call. Like that's what I'm paid to do is make the call. There's rarely a decision that you can't walk back if you were wrong, and just continuing to learn and grow as you do it.
Well, thanks. Such great advice, Kelly. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Appreciate it. I love anytime I can talk about my job. It's a good day.